I'm Dennis Washington, president, founder of Cross Digital and CrossDig.com. You're listening to the Cross Digital podcast. Got a great interview for you today. A good personal friend of mine from many years ago, back when I was in college. It's been a few years. We're coming up on 20 years, I guess it is, not far away from that. But anyways, Dr. Chandra Clark, she's a assistant professor at the University of Alabama. She teaches broadcast news and production, social media, media marketing in the TCF department there at Alabama. She's also been extremely involved with a lot of media organizations such as the National Association of Broadcasters. She even worked on a series of videos for them following the 2011 tornadoes in Alabama and Joplin, Missouri, and most recently worked on a project after Hurricane Sandy back just a year ago in October. It's actually coming up on the one-year anniversary, October of 2012. After that event, she went up and did some recent videos to help profile the role of broadcasters, specifically meteorologists, in getting the word out and getting the warning out, and how that has changed, obviously. And instead of just a television signaling now, you've got all the social media that makes that happen as well. So I finally pinned her down for a few minutes to have a great interview to talk with her about social media and journalism and how that's changing in the classroom, the students that are coming on to colleges now, the challenges they're facing as far as traditional journalism goes, and what they are encountering, and the challenges she has as a professor in trying to teach them a lot of the basics of journalism when they're getting bombarded with a lot of different conflicting information and so forth from all sorts of places. Just how to stay focused and the impact of brand journalism on that as well, companies needing journalists and so forth, and just a lot of great insight there. So without further ado, here's the interview with Dr. Clark. I'm joined now with Dr. Chandra Clark, professor at the University of Alabama, a good friend of mine, long time, been working together for many years. Chandra, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So just to kind of give everybody that may not know who you are and what you do, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I am a full-time professor at the University of Alabama, and I teach in our electronic news sequence. And basically, I have four main classes that I teach, and one of them is new media, which is an ever-changing class. And then I teach advanced broadcast news and introduction to reporting and producing. So I pretty much have a handle on students from the time they're a sophomore, getting into their major, all the way through them being a senior and getting ready to graduate.
You and I have been through this ourselves as students, and you've certainly been a lot more closely associated with the college scene than I have been over the last few years. But it's looking at the last 5 or 10 years, and we'll touch on the technology side of things, but what are you seeing as the biggest challenges for students that are coming out of high school into college and then college into the real world of journalism? What are the biggest challenges that they are facing right now?
Well, one of the things that I think they don't quite understand is they don't have an opinion when it comes to news. They see so many different varieties of newscasts, with cable news being 24/7 now, that they don't realize that they're not going to be able to insert their opinion into reporting. And then they're also butted up against having so much social media right at their fingertips where people are saying their opinions constantly. So I think they're having a little bit of a struggle with figuring out how do you tell objective stories where in my earlier journalism days and yours and our colleagues, we did not have social media where we heard back so quickly from citizens, and we trying to weave through those opinions and what actually makes a story, because they have so many more influences that they are seeing on a story right now. And that seems to be a challenge that I see in every age group, from sophomores to seniors, on how to weigh that out a little bit.
Well, you bring up a great point, because as you mentioned, 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have that kind of problem with instant opinions and the volume of that, and it coming from every direction. It's not like it just comes from one place, but there are so many different channels and social media channels out there. How do you go about, though, with a student that is struggling with understanding the importance of trying to be objective on a story? How do you try to convince them of that?
Well, I actually use adjectives and adverbs and the things our English teacher used to teach us that are key indicators of showing how just one simple wording can make it seem like you have an opinion on something. If I say a certain adjective that, someone's shoes are brown, is anyone going to argue with that? It is the truth. It's a fact. Or I can say, their brown boots are beautiful. Well, that's my opinion. Someone else may think that they're ugly. I try to go back to things that they can understand and make them try to realize, that everyone has an opinion. I have an opinion that on air, or if I am reporting for someone and I'm speaking for a company that has a journalistic base, I can't have an opinion if I'm speaking for them. And so I try to take them back to the basics and things that they can understand and relate to. And that's always a challenge, but usually the basics do work, and trying to make them really think about their wording and phrases. And really, I do think that the social media aspect of it, they get it now because they are in that world so much. But once they start a professional career, trying to teach them how to weigh out whose opinion matters more. And really everybody has an opinion.
Well, and I know with social media, and there's a lot of media companies now that are encouraging viewers to come on and give their opinion, and then they're even showing those opinions from Facebook and Twitter on TV. Then they turn around and ask their employees of these media companies not to share their opinions and to be as unbiased as possible. I imagine it's kind of a challenge when you start trying to convince students of that, and yet then they get flooded by looking at real-world examples and maybe even sometimes some of these rogue reporters that are out giving their opinions on Twitter and Facebook. I imagine that's kind of a challenge to try to get them to overlook what they see coming out of some of these so-called journalistic companies.
Right. We actually just finished up critiques where my students had to critique a local newscast. Then they critiqued a network newscast, which are your traditional ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then they had to critique cable news. And it was amazing to see the difference in how they critique them and for them to separate what the differences are in the three. And the cable news, they recognize very quickly how much more opinion is in cable newscast versus network and local from the broadcasters. Of course, we're interviewing people who have opinions, but our job is to balance that out and make sure that we're giving both sides of the story. And so it was pretty evident that most of them got that fact, but the problem with it is a lot of times we have to force students to watch it. They don't take the time to watch it from a critical standpoint. And so I was very pleased once I read their critiques that they understood, hey, these are people that are just talking, and they all are having opinions, and that is not what we saw in local and network news. There is a difference in the different types of news we're watching. You've got to be careful about who you're quoting and what you're doing because, everybody has an opinion. It's got to be structured.
And I mean, you make a good point there with the differences in the local versus the national and the cable channels. Is it challenging, though, once they even realize the differences in the presentation of opinion versus fact, the glamour of being on network or cable news? Is it still challenging for them to try to get the students to understand the importance of still trying to stay unbiased, even though they see so much opinion in such a glamorous role on a national stage?
I think so. I mean, I think they get it. I think they understand that they're not going to go straight to the network level anyway, and so they want to follow more of the model of the network and local to start out with, because they know they've got to gain a reputation. And most of the people, and one of them even, one of the quotes they had in their paper I thought made a lot of sense, said, I may eventually work there, but I know I'm not going to start there because I don't have the credibility yet to be on air to give those kind of opinions. Nobody's going to respect my opinion at this stage in my career anyway. So I think they do understand the stereotypes, but not if we don't make them watch it. One of the things that I found when I went into teaching broadcast news, coming from a professional background, even my first semester, I realized that students didn't watch news. Even though they're going into it, they haven't been forced to watch it with a critical eye. And that really pays off in making them watch it. And if you're going to be a practitioner of news, you have to know what news is.
That's a great point. It's kind of like criticizing politicians if you didn't vote. I mean, you need to be a part of the process, and certainly to have a better understanding before you come into something. It certainly, and you raise a good point too with the students and just getting more involved. What surprises you the most about the students when they look at a local news or a national news product? Because they're certainly going to be seeing it from a different view than those of us that have been in the business and seen the dramatic changes that have happened. Do you think they're more intimidated by the process, or does it feel more natural to them, the idea of a multimedia newsroom?
I don't think they get it. Not as students. They just don't. I just went through and walked them through how many steps it takes to make a package. And we added up, and there were 16 physical steps that they go through to make a minute-and-a-half piece that a reporter puts together. And then yesterday we did an exercise where they had to record on a chroma key one VO script. And it's just an eye-opening experience to them. So when they physically watch a newscast, they're getting tidbits and putting all the pieces to the puzzle together of, oh, that's why I write a tease. That's how they're going to use that information. Or that's why she was pushing me on making sure my script was in active voice and in present tense. They are still putting together the pieces to the puzzle every time they watch a newscast. The light bulb is still going on, and that's what I love about teaching, is you can witness them figuring out that puzzle. And usually by the time they're a senior, they still need to be pushed, but it takes a little bit of everything in a curriculum, especially in a new electronic news sequence or telecommunications film, whatever you call it. You need to have a little bit of everything to let them sample to figure out the big piece to the puzzle.
Well, just kind of a small transition out of that, but there's such a big push now by companies and brands to hire journalists or former journalists even to come in and basically turn their business into a digital newsroom of sorts. I was reading this week about Wells Fargo in the process of building and opening a social media center, almost in a sense, of on both coasts, on the East Coast and another one on the West Coast, that would strictly monitor social media and help with their content decisions for their sites and the discussions that people are having about their company and their products online. With all of this importance by businesses on brand journalism, do you find that the pressure is starting to mount on some of these high school and college students, that they're starting to see the options of, instead of going into a traditional news role, to go straight into almost a brand journalism role?
Oh, definitely, and I think that's a big challenge that every university and every college who has any type of classes like we do, that they're facing. And when I go to these different conventions and workshops for educators like the Society of Professional Journalists, Radio, Television, Digital News Association and the Broadcast Education Association, that's the main topic, is how do you fit this into your curriculum, and then how do you teach it in real form? And I've been doing this now for about 4 years, teaching a new media class, and every semester I feel like it's different. I feel like there are different things that I need to make sure that I'm stressing to them to make them critically understand the world they're about to jump into, because the last workshop I just went to in California at the RTDNA National Convention, every booth I went around to in the career fair was asking, are you teaching digital producing? That was the big question. Are you teaching future digital producers and producers? They weren't asking about traditional reporters and writers. They are really hurting and needing someone of this age group who can understand how the digital world is working. And so that's why my new media class now takes so much of my time out of more than any of my classes, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm stressing branding, search engine optimization, and then working in to make sure they actually know how Twitter is being used and how to manage multiple social media accounts, because I think that's going to really help give them an edge for that future job interview. And I've already been told that it has. We've had several that have gotten jobs, and that has really helped them in the interviewing process and to catch the attention, because we are teaching a class like that. Is it perfect? No. But it is definitely something that we have recognized we have to do.
Well, and I mean, you know, from a business perspective, I mean, I just came out of traditional newsroom operation into a business, but the social media aspect of growing my business is extremely important, and there are so many factors involved, and it's one of those things, if you're not using it on a daily basis for a business role, it can be very confusing on how to do that. I visit with a lot of clients, a lot of businesses who don't understand how social media can help them grow, how their website can help them, and I'm certain that a student coming out of high school and college with the right training can certainly do that. I guess my big question though in this regard is, do you find the students coming through your classes, are they more intrigued and excited about the idea of going a brand journalism role instead of a traditional journalism role?
That is a good question. Maybe I didn't hit on that the right way, but I don't know. I think a lot of times at this stage in their career, they are typically just confused still, even as a senior. They hear so much about the economy and the market, they just want a job. But I do think they feel more confident that they can probably get something along the digital route, because there have been so many more opportunities opened up by social media. They have heard how hard it is to get that single reporter job at a station. And they know how hard it is to break into, broadcast news or sports on the air. So they are embracing more so that there are new opportunities by new media, social media, and becoming more of a digital producer. So maybe that answered that question a little bit more. I think they're more excited that there are more job opportunities opened up that way, and so they are embracing it a little bit more.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense. I mean, and I guess from a perspective of, you think of a lot of these students have grown up in a sense around social media, where it began with MySpace, but YouTube, and then Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, and it's second nature to them. And some of the rock stars almost that they're encountering on social media, I can certainly see is how that can be intriguing to them. One thing, and I wanted to get a little bit into this topic, because you have not just in the classroom, but you've dealt with a lot of real world experiences with some natural disasters and looked at how communication as a whole, not just with social media, but communication as a whole has benefited all of us in society, and one that certainly dear to my heart was what happened in the 2011 tornadoes through here in Alabama in April of 2011, and then I know you also did some collaboration on the Joplin tornado shortly after that. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what you did after the fact to kind of shine a light on the communication there.
Well, one of the things that happened was I witnessed it all firsthand. Living in Tuscaloosa, I knew the warnings were coming out a week before, and I saw the posts. I saw all the meteorologists and the job that they were doing, and I saw how people were responding to it. Some ignoring it, they're just talking like normal. And no, they're posting much more. They're trying to reach everyone through every social media form that they had, on the air, by the words they used, the language they used, trying to make sure people were paying attention. This is different. This is not what we've always had. And then to see it happen, and then to see how people were forced. If they wanted information, they had to use social media because the power was out or the phones were out, that they still had their phones. And I witnessed that in Tuscaloosa, and then a month later in Joplin. I was working disaster relief because my church had gotten destroyed also, and we were using social media to help get the word out about ourselves. And then Joplin happened, and I was already tied into those disaster relief groups out there and monitored what they were doing. And then that summer got asked to do some mini documentary work through the National Association of Broadcasters, and worked with a colleague of mine from Oklahoma. And so we worked in Tuscaloosa and did stories here and asked people, how did they find out for life-saving information they needed? And they gave it all to the meteorologists who did their job. And part of doing their job was reaching out and communicating through all the avenue streams that they had. And then in Joplin, it was the same story. It hit much differently than it did here in Tuscaloosa. There wasn't much warning, but they used all the streams that they had to communicate with the public. And then last October, coming up on the anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, 1 year later, the meteorologists there and the reporters and the anchors, a hurricane is much different to cover than a tornado, as you very well know. They had many days of warning, and you saw them do the same thing. So we're learning how to use it in real time and learning how to use it to save lives. And it is important that people understand what a hashtag is, where to go for that information. And I think the role of us as broadcasters is we have to train people that is where they're going to have to go for information when we're not on the air.
Well, and you make a lot of great points there, and certainly, I was in Tuscaloosa 2 years ago and witnessed that as well. And we were very involved at the TV station I was working at the time. We were very involved in all the social media channels we could be to try to get the word out. And I know of a lot of people that would even follow me on my personal Facebook accounts for information during severe weather, because you start to trust people. And this goes back to a lot of what I tell people about the idea of you may be a business, but ultimately you're a collection of people inside that business trying to connect with customers who have common interests. Well, when it comes to communication and TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, whatever, you've really just got a group of people that you're consumers have connected with. The connection method is what's changing. As a broadcaster, it's not necessarily that one-way street with a TV antenna on the top, but now it could be a two-way avenue with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube videos and so forth. So there's so many different ways that broadcasters are communicating now, and that to me is what seems like the huge value in broadcasters being able to do their jobs even better is just being able to get that information and faster from more sources.
Definitely. I remember looking at a Google map, and I'm trying to remember which hurricane it was coming up in the Gulf, and it was just very eye-opening to me what Google had done, because they had tied in every location where that hurricane may hit, and there were YouTube videos you could click on in those different locations. and you clicked on it, and it came out video, somewhere from citizen journalists who had just taken video of what was going on there at the time, and somewhere from some of the TV stations, some of the reports they had put out. And it was, we want video. We want to see video. And they had incorporated that into just a general map.
Yeah.
And you just see how we're learning how to do it better and getting the word out to people, because people are on everything. They're walking around with a computer in their hands or in their pocket all the time. And so I think media companies, local, national, and global, they are figuring out that they have to reach out in so many multiple ways, and that is opening up jobs for these future students.
Well, and obviously, yeah, that does come out because you've got this opportunity to engage your consumers in ways that never have happened before, and certainly people need to be able to do that. What concern, though, there's extremely, especially in a severe weather or breaking news situation, there can be a dramatic amount of value in the crowdsourcing effort that happens through video and through information like on Twitter and so forth. How concerned, though, when you're talking to students and training them with this idea about being skeptical of information as it comes in a breaking news situation in real time?
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, that's definitely a big concern. And, I teach at least two sources. John Cochran from ABC News was just here last week, and I went to listen to him talk, and he talked about, the origin of having two sources on a story and how that goes back in our history of journalism. And I tell them they better attribute it, or I wouldn't say it. If they don't have it from somewhere that is a credible source, they're going to get themselves in trouble. And that's the only thing I can know to tell them, is because they can't just go off of someone said. You still have to have the foundations of good journalism, and that goes right back to attribution, to any of your sources, whether they be eyewitnesses, whether they're a doctor, whether they're a lawyer. Your information needs to be noted of where it's coming from. And I think that's a very hard lesson for some of them to understand, but I'm trying to make sure they do that every time in every script that I proof and read.
Well, and the attribution is so key, and I know you start to get into a whole different discussion about the legal risk involved in even in attribution, but I think that transparency of the process, which has never really been available before, but the whole idea of news gathering, and then with social media now, it's really been able to allow broadcasters to be more transparent in their process of news gathering, and I think there's probably, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would just tend to feel that there's a lot more safety when you do start to attribute your sources and be honest with people about the process of how you got this information and how you've at least attempted to verify it. We're not perfect, but I do think there's it does at least provide some honesty and say, okay, we feel pretty certain about this, but we're still checking on it.
Right. And, that still goes back to scanner traffic days. You hear something on the scanner, you better not report it because you need to get it confirmed first. The same thing with the Capitol shooting the other day in Washington, D.C. I saw, it was a funny graphic the next day from, I think it was the Society of Professional Journalists had put out, and it said, the question was, do you ever report scanner traffic? Do you ever tweet live scanner traffic? And you opened it up, and the graphic said, no, no, no. And it's the same type of thing. Let people do their job.
Exactly. Well, you bring up, it's kind of like the idea of if you see something on Twitter, just automatically turn around and retweeting it. And there's some concern from people, and I guess this just comes with experience as you start to learn and realize that you see something that doesn't sound correct, sound normal, and start to become skeptical. the training starts to kick in. It's like, okay, maybe I don't need to retweet that yet. Let's see if that really pans out. And the idea of being right instead of being first kind of plays in there. And I know that's something you've taught and all, but I imagine for college students that are used to instantaneous communication in their life, that's kind of a tough one for them to grasp.
I think so too. Even for some of my colleagues, one of them the other day posted, it was an article about these two meteorologists who got into a fight at their TV station. They worked for like a duopoly, and in the article, it was talking about how they got into an argument basically on air, and they were both belittling each other. Well, I started reading it, and then I saw a picture down below of them like posing like they were getting ready to go outside and fight. And I'm like, are you sure this is real? There's signs here. I've been trained to look at a story and know if it's real or not.
Right.
And I pretty quickly picked up on it, and she checked on it. She goes, you know what? You're right. I got duped. And
Yep.
she's, a producer and produces newscasts all the time. And, there's just so much out there. Sometimes it just seems funny. You want to believe it's true, but you really just have to look and dig a little deeper sometimes.
Well, and I think exactly. And then the idea of your experiences as you get older, that you do become a little more skeptical of things that, okay, that sounds like a sensational story. Wonder if it's really true or not. And just especially when you learn the hard way sometime of reporting something that ended up not being true, you do like, okay, I'll bank that one in the back of my brain that I'll remember that next time. So, well, Chandra, I would love to continue this conversation, but I know you and I have got other things to do, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and look forward to all of your work. Have you got any big projects coming up your way?
Actually, I am working on the Moore tornado documentary right now.
Okay.
And combining the Joplin and Tuscaloosa into it. My colleague covered the Moore, Oklahoma tornado. And so we are working on that project and a couple more things in the works, but we can talk about those later.
There's always, it's never, for those of y'all watching this or listening, Chandra and I talk frequently, usually through Facebook or something like that, but it seems like between her schedule and my schedule, trying to find a time to work, to get a chance like this to talk, it doesn't happen very often because very busy people. But as I tell folks, if you want to get something done right, find the busiest person you can find because they will certainly make that happen for you. Chandra, great to talk to you and look forward to more conversations, and good luck to you in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it.
And again, that was Dr. Chandra Clark, the University of Alabama. Just a fantastic interview. She's, as you can tell, we've known each other for several years, had a lot of information going back. She and I met when we were at Alabama in the journalism degree back years ago, and just fantastic at what she does. She brings a lot of insight into there, and she's not one of these kind of people that really rushes to judgment on a lot of things. Very thoughtful, very considerate of that, and a good Christian woman as well. Got a very nice family that I've met over the years, and just appreciate her taking the time today to sit in and talk with me on the podcast here for the Cross Digital podcast. Again, if you need her to contact her for any information, just go to ua.edu, and I'll list this on the show notes as well on crossdig.com. In the blog there, you'll see the link to the show notes for this on how to get in contact with her. But appreciate it, the time again from her. And looking forward to next week. Got several more interviews that I'm working on. Hope to have something great for you as well. If you need something from me, feel free to contact me at crossdig.com. Shoot me an email, message. If you've got someone that you think would be a great interview guest, love to hear that as well. Certainly always looking for someone exciting, intriguing, entertaining, informing. Is that a word? Informing? Someone that can help us, all of us as a group, as a community, be better at what we do. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Dennis Washington on the Cross Digital Podcast.